Thank you. Thank you so much, sir, for bringing forth the performance challenges, aims and aspirations of the senior management of an organization and giving a comparison of the traditional and emerging forms of learning. As you said, tough times require more and swift learning, and we all here are trying relentlessly to adapt to the changing times. Thank you so much once again. Now we have with us a multi-award winning keynote speaker, executive coach, author, and senior faculty and program director at Singapore Management University, who combines the best of the corporate practicality with the depth of academic framework to create the shifts needed to lead in the world of disruption. Ms. Tanvi Gautam, ladies and gentlemen, the first Asia-based leader to be listed on the Game Changer list by the Workforce magazine of the USA, and the only Asia-based HR influencer to be on the SAP Global HXM list. Her ideas have been published and quoted in Forbes, Harvard Business Review, Business Times, Economic Times, BBC World, and other global publications. Author of 2 books and listed as a top 200 global influencers on leadership by People Hum. A certified storyteller coach, certified conversational intelligence coach, and certified culture talk tools coach who has worked with the leaders across the globe, helping them raise their potential as impactful, authentic, engaged, and inclusive leaders. Madam, we are indeed honored to have you amidst us today. The forum is all yours for the special address. Over to you, Tanvi ma'am.
Thank you so much, Neha. I really appreciate being here on this fabulous curtain raiser that we have. I believe I have about 45 minutes to do this very special address. And so I have set my timer. Professor Dr. Mohapatra, congratulations on the launch of the fabulous IFTDO 2022 curtain raiser. It is great energy. I would love to know where everybody is joining from. And I like to use the chat, right? So I will be looking to the chat to hear from you, your ideas, your thoughts, your questions as I am going along. So if you could please go to the chat and say a quick hi. Tell us where you are joining this global event from so that we can have an idea of where our participants are. So what I'm going to be talking to you today has got to do with a topic that I'm doing a lot of work on recently, which has to do with crafting a high performance culture for a post-COVID world. Now, thank you, Dr. Albana from Bahrain. Lovely to see you in the chat. We have been talking about high performance cultures, but what is going to be different for designing a culture for a post-COVID world? And I know that this is a global group, so chances are that some of you are thinking, what post-COVID world? It's still very much the heat of the pandemic is being felt in the region where I am. But here's the thing, the preparation for the post-COVID world must begin now. We can't wait for some timeline, some sort of 0 degree of infection transmission before we start working on what is a high performance culture in the post-COVID world. So as I share with you some trends that I'm seeing as I'm working with my clients globally, as I share with you some strategies that you can start using for your own organizations, I thought I will actually start with a story, because I do a lot of work on storytelling. And as Jack mentioned, stories are a very, very important component on how we connect with our people. So let me take you back about 100 years. And there was an advertisement that came out in the newspaper. And I want you to read this advertisement and tell me in the chat, would you have applied for this role? The advertisement said, men wanted for a hazardous journey, small wages, bitter cold, long months of complete darkness, constant danger, safe return doubtful, honor and recognition in case of success. Reply to Ernest Shackleton, 4 Burlington Street. Would you have applied to this advertisement if you had seen it? Now, the interesting thing is, sometimes when I share this advertisement, and by the way, it's a real advertisement, I haven't made this up, people look at me and they say, oh, that sounds like our company. So hopefully you're not working at any one such company. But this advertisement got close to 500 responses. Now you have to remember, this is not the time of LinkedIn and Twitter and emails where you can spread the word about a job opening. And yet 500 people applied. What it was Ernest Shackleton was wanting to take an exploration across the North Pole, and he wanted to be the first man to cross the North Pole. And he gathered a crew of about 20 people, and he started off on this journey. And within about 5 days of being on this journey, his ship got stuck in packed ice. Now, I want you to imagine this. I want you to imagine that you are on this ship with 20 other people, and you can't go forward. You can't go backward. The ship can't move. You have no way of contacting home base. So you're sitting there and you're waiting for the ice to crack so that the ship can move. Almost feels a little bit like COVID, isn't it? Can't go forward, can't go back, stuck in the middle of nowhere. Now, Ernest Shackleton, he was stuck in this situation, that's him actually, for a good 18 months. And he brought back every single crew member alive, even after they finished with food supplies. Their boat had collapsed and they had been walking on ice to get to an island. And we teach the Ernest Shackleton case study at the business school as an example of what leadership should look like in a crisis. And when we teach this case study, and I would encourage you to look him up on YouTube, there are actual video footage of what that journey was like. We often remind people at the business school that this journey, Shackleton's expedition, represents a bold and complex initiative which could not have been survived just on the basis of tools and technology alone. It needed inspired, aligned action on part of the people. So let's talk about another bold and complex initiative that is unfolding right now, which is the post-pandemic transformation, which is also a bold and complex initiative. And your organization is not going to survive just on the basis of tools and technology alone. Your organization needs inspired, aligned action. So when I kind of think about what are the trends I'm noticing as I'm working with clients across the globe, just how inspired and aligned are people for this transformation? Because the pandemic requires a change in the DNA of the organization itself. It is not about people are already talking with nostalgia. Oh, we wish we could go back to the good old days, and the new normal is a variation of the old normal, just with some more technology thrown in. No, we must make sure that when we create the next world order, it represents a distinct shift from the culture that was in the past. So I want to talk to you today about 3 trends that I have been noticing as I'm working with organizations. And I would love for you to comment in the chat whether you are noticing these trends as well or not. Trend number 1, goals are present, but engagement is absent. Organizations are setting up goals, they're setting up new directions, they're laying out journey maps, but how engaged are people? Because here's the truth. People are exhausted. They're emerging from almost 2 years of fear and worry and anxiety and grief. Many of you who are on this call right now have been engaging in what is called emotional labor. Emotional labor is a term that is used to describe how you continue to keep showing up for your people, pretending that everything is fine, that you understand what to do, but inside you yourself are exhausted. Couple this with the reality of executive loneliness. A lot of people who are at the top of the organization don't feel a sense of community around them right now. And the final nail in the coffin is the constant sensorial overload. I'm talking to Sanjeev from IFTDO right now. We are talking on WhatsApp. We are talking on the direct chat on Zoom. We are talking on email. Constantly, communication is coming at us from multiple sources. An exhausted workforce is not going to be an engaged workforce. Do you agree with me? You cannot expect people to be engaging with the transformation agenda when there is an exhaustion agenda that is going on. And Chris is saying we are losing human contact at huge cost for the future. That's exactly right. I agree. The second trend that I'm noticing is that technology is present, but temperament is absent. So I like this cartoon that I saw, which says, you need a dashboard application to track your key metrics. That way, you'll have more data to ignore when you make your decisions based on company politics. So it doesn't matter how much technology you are throwing in your organization. If people don't have the mindset, then any amount of technology is not going to change the way they engage with whether artificial intelligence or blockchain or what is the latest thing we have going around, NFTs. It doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. Trend number 3. Framework is present, but framing is absent. What does that mean? If I go to any organization, they have some variation of a chart like this, which has existed pre-pandemic, but continues to persist now. Agility is on top of the agenda, followed by risk appetite, decision-making, leader structure, work style. We need to move from slow and deliberative to nimble and quick, risk-averse to bold and exploratory, instinctive to data-driven, hierarchical distribution. Every single client organization that I work with has a variation of this chart. But preaching point is not the meeting point, which means that simply standing there and telling your people that let's be more bold, let's be more agile, let's be more human, that is not going to do it. If you want your people to be engaged with your agenda, you have to give them engagement. Engagement is a two-way street. So the question becomes, why is there this gaping hole between goals and engagement, technology and temperament, framework and framing? And for this, you need to come back and do a little bit of time travel to understand how have we historically arrived at where we are today in the way we think about culture, the way we think about leadership, and the way we think about employees. Let's take a quick trip through history. It all began with Frederick Taylor and our ability to think of an organization as a machine. When we thought about the organization as a machine, we focus on efficiency, and we focus on production, and we focus on processes, the tracking of time, motion studies, all of that. That's where this whole thing begins. And humans were seen as a resource to harvest. We then moved on from organization as a machine to organization as a brain. Now we started focusing on data and knowledge flows, and we entered the age of analytics, artificial intelligence, and digital transformation. Our focus now became technology and process. Humans were now seen as capital, and capital was worth investing in. That was the terminology that we were using. However, there is a third frame which goes beyond human resources and human capital. That frame has got to do with humans being seen for their humanity. And now we are not talking about harvesting human resources. We are not talking just about investing in human capital. We are talking about activating human potential. So let's do a quick recap. The organization frame and the impact on HR action. Product and processes, when we were focused on these areas, we were talking about human resources and how do we harvest them, how do we get most out of them. Then we went on to look at data, knowledge, and technology. We started talking about human capital, and we started thinking of investment and return on investment. Now we are looking at meaning and impact, and we are looking at the potential of humanity, and we are talking about activating humanity. Now, here's the interesting thing. All three frames can coexist, but the first two are limited by the absence of the third frame, which means if you are in an organization where you have got human resource harvesting practices and human capital investing practices, but you're missing the third, which is activation, you are not going to create a culture of high performance, because a company needs to harvest, invest, and activate in an aligned manner. Because a digital firm, which is what we all have now, with an analog mindset that is only harvest and invest, will get disrupted. And we have all put a lot of faith in technology. We have covered 6 years of digital transformation in less than 6 months when the pandemic broke out. So the rate of technology adoption is extremely high. But as I'm often quoted for saying, any organization or any enterprise, no matter how digital, will not outperform its human architecture. And human architecture runs on meaning, contribution, and community. Which means that if you want to create a culture of high performance, you have to move from an ecosystem approach to an ecosystem approach. You need to move from what I call guerrilla leadership, I, me, myself, my 2 feet by 2 feet, to honeycomb leadership, where we are thinking about how we are all working together. I mean, we have seen this in the pandemic, haven't we? We can no longer pretend, oh, it's happening somewhere out there in Wuhan. I don't have to worry about it. No, you have to worry about it. Because the world has become so interconnected that we simply cannot ignore something by saying, oh, it's not my problem. Well, if you think it's not your problem, very soon it will become yours, simply because you didn't recognize the interdependence of the systems that we are living in. And that is why that shift from ecosystem to ecosystems is very, very important. So who will enable this shift and what does it take? So let's talk about what I call the 3 steps to success if you want to create a culture of high performance. By the way, can you please go to the chat and let me know how this is resonating with you? Are you also noticing these trends in your organizations? Whether the things I've talked about, engagement with technology, or the things I have talked about, the gap between framework and framing. I would love to know. I mean, this has to be a two-way conversation. There are people in this room who are very, very senior and who bring a lot of experience. And so it's critical that we are learning as we are having this conversation. So 3 steps to success. Step number 1, and these are not hierarchical steps. You just do need these 3 steps. Step number 1, digital needs human and humans need a narrative. Digital needs human and humans need a narrative. What do I mean by that? Narrative can be used as a tool for inspired and aligned action. But what is a narrative? Narrative is just a frame. It's the frame that your company puts on reality. Narrative is the big story of your company that customers gravitate towards and employees rally behind. And that is why I really appreciated when Jack in his keynote was talking about the important role of storytelling. Now, storytelling is a subset of the company narrative, but you need a company narrative, the big story towards which customers gravitate and employees rally behind, because human architecture, like I said, runs on meaning, contribution, and community. And narrative gives them that. So what are the components of narrative? The components of a good narrative are that it is an inspired purpose, it's what you offer the world, and it's your unique and differentiated approach. Companies need to be able to talk about themselves beyond the profit imperative to the purpose imperative, the planet imperative, the imperative of the narrative of interdependence must come through. A recognition of what differentiates a company from the other, that people actually want to work with you, that people actually want to engage with you, that people actually want to have high performance because their performance makes a difference. A well-framed company narrative activates us to do more and be more. A narrative invites people, future employees and potential partners, to join in your quest. It is an epic story about who you are, who you can be, and why should anyone care. All 3. Who you are, who you can be, and why should anyone care? One of the questions that I ask the leaders that I work with, and it stumps a lot of them when I ask them this question, is who would miss your company if it disappears tomorrow? And if the answer is that you are going to get replaced by another company who can do it maybe cheaper, faster, better, then you really need to think about what is your narrative? What is the story? High performance culture requires you to have purpose in the center. So I was at a Wall Street Journal event with Indra Nui about 2 years ago when she was visiting Singapore. And she was talking about how PepsiCo has created a high performance culture and how purpose is at the center of it. And I raised my hand and I said, I don't know what this fuss about culture is all about, because when I began my career in Tata Consultancy Services, we've been working with the community forever. So what is this, big, now we need to have purpose in the organization all about? I mean, haven't we always done it? Is this like a newfangled thing that's coming from the West? when in the East, we've always talked about culture, about purpose. And she said, I know the work that the Tatas do and how impactful that is in the community, but there is a difference. Previously, you used to have a company and you used to have a purpose. And companies would exist for profit and they would serve the community with a purpose agenda on the sideline. It was a CSR initiative. Now we want purpose to be at the core and the company to be built around it. Your shareholders are asking about purpose. Your customers are asking about purpose. Your stakeholders are asking about purpose. And the sustainability agenda, thanks to the regulation from financial institutions, has become a lot more center of your business model itself, right? So that was step number one. Do you have a clear narrative? Is this resonating? Can you go to the chat and let me know? Dr. Albana, you were the one who responded to me last time, so I'm looking at you on how this is resonating. Please let me know in the chat. And Chris, you too, don't give up on me just yet. You were there at the start, and now I see that you've kind of dropped off to whatever you are doing, so stay with me. Okay, step number two. Step number two is that our historic thinking, thank you, Roy. Singaporeans must stick together now, okay? All right, step number two. Our historic thinking around work and rest has to be revisited. That's a good excuse, Chris. I'll take it. Our historical thinking around work and rest has got to be reframed. How do we think about work? How do we think about rest? Normally, when I ask people, how do they feel about their work? This is the kind of thing they talk about. It's endless drudgery, it's strife, it's stress, and everybody's exhausted and everybody is burnt out. And there are a whole bunch of unquestioned assumptions around the need to be connected 24/7. I know some people who sleep with their phone on just because they want to be exceptionally responsive to the fact that their work has a digital footprint. My work has a digital footprint. If I wanted right now, I could work through the night. But we have unquestioned assumptions. I remember the funniest thing about this was my husband's company recently wanted to do a call about work-life balance, a US-based organization. The call for work-life balance, a global call. In Asia, it was going to happen at 3 a.m. Like, I don't even want to comment on that idea, on why nobody is thinking of the fact that people are in different time zones. But we have these unquestioned assumptions around the need to be connected 24/7 because we think of work and rest as separate forces. We think of work and rest as opposing forces. If I'm working, I should not be resting. And my rest doesn't have anything to do with work. But I want you to remember this, and I'm spending a lot of time with companies right now doing work on what I call the R factor. What is the R factor? It's the rest and recovery factor. How do you recalibrate your relationship with rest and recovery? It's a whole keynote. And I think it's particularly this time of the year, it's getting to be year end, it's Thanksgiving, Christmas, everybody's winding down. But I tell them this: strong work ethics, unless accompanied by a strong rest ethic, is a path to burnout. All your companies have got a work ethic, but what is their rest ethic? And if you don't have a rest ethic, where do you think you're going? So time spent on rest and recovery is a performance metric. If HR is tracking time spent on work, they need to start tracking time spent on rest. And I agree with Chris that if we start prioritizing rest as a metric, that is going to be a very, very good outcome of this pandemic. Ever since the pandemic started, I've started doing two things. One, Fridays, I don't do meetings, I don't do trainings, I don't do keynotes. Does this mean every Friday I have? No. I mean, I had to do a keynote for Meta. The only day they had the studio for recording was a Friday, so I went. But that's not the norm. Freedom from meetings Friday, that's become the norm. Now, I am in control of my schedule, I understand. But companies need to do more about this as well. And so the time spent on rest and recovery is to be seen as a performance metric. Now, forget about the company. Let's talk about you. What is your relationship as a leader to rest and recovery? You know, we all grew up with the strong Asian work ethic. A lot of people in the West grew up with the strong Protestant work ethic. We believe our work is us, we are our work. That assumed normalcy, which we have not seen now for 2 years. Organizations are treating burnout still as an individual issue. If Roy comes to his boss tomorrow and says, oh, I'm feeling burnt out, they'll probably say, oh, take some time off, go on the cruise to nowhere, take it easy. And then when he comes back, nothing has changed and he will burn out again. So burnout is not an individual issue. Burnout is a system issue now. You cannot have a performance of a culture of high performance if you are not paying attention to the rest and recovery ethic. And as for you, learn to ask for help before you need it. We don't know how to ask for help. Our relationship with asking for help is broken. We think if we're going to ask for help, that we are going to be seen less than. Now, remember, I'm all about storytelling, right? So I was leading this global project, about 30 people, very highly visible global project. And it was about a 7-month project. In the 7 months, and this is during the pandemic, by the way, in the 7 months, one member of my team got dumped by his fiance. He was completely heartbroken. Another member of my team was showing visible signs of depression. Another member of my team had a miscarriage. Another member of my team, as though it wasn't bad enough, lost her puppy to a freak accident in the parking lot. And there I was trying to anchor everybody, trying to keep it together because I was the leader of my team. And then I got news of COVID having reached my family. And what did I do? Did I ask for help? Here I am giving a big talk on the rest and recovery ethic. Did I ask for help? No. I soldiered on. And in fact, I'm writing an article about this. How do you ask for help when everybody comes to you for help? So no, I didn't ask for help. And then one day in a meeting, just like this, in the middle of my presentation, for no reason whatsoever, I broke down and I started crying, a full body cry. And I had to turn off the camera because I didn't want my teams to see me like that. Please ask for help before you are forced to need it. Asking for help is an act of service towards the organization and the people and the causes that you care about. But that also you when you go to somebody and say, I need help. Psychological safety, which I'm sure you've all heard of, is involved in asking for help. This idea of me, my reputation, my job, my promotion not being at risk just because I'm asking for help. Step number 3, and the final step, I know I've got about 14 minutes left. Step number 3 has to do with the mindset of experimentation. You and your organization in the mindset of experimentation. You know, I speak on so many HR panels and I moderate a lot of C-suite conversations. And right now, everybody is obsessed with the return to the workplace. Do we continue working from home? Do we continue coming to work? If we continue to come to work, how many days should we come to work? Is it everybody in the office? Are we going to talk about the hybrid work environment? Some companies have decided that, you know what, we can't bother with this. Each team decide for itself, which creates other problems as well. That level of decentralization creates its own problem. So at every panel discussion, at every forum, what is your view? Do you think, you know, you should do a hybrid workplace? We should. The answer is you will not know till you try. There is no playbook. Experiment and scale. Experiment and scale. See what works. Understand that what works today may not work tomorrow. We thought Europe was out of the pandemic. It's like a Ferris wheel. I'm up right now, you're down. Don't get too happy about it because the wheel is turning soon, yeah? And you will be out of lockdown and I will be back in lockdown. So never look at other people's Facebook posts where they are sitting and having a party without masks and say, oh, poor me, or don't worry, your time will come. So it's a Ferris wheel. So if it's a Ferris wheel, you have to have an experimental mindset. A lot of people will say, what will I lose if I take this risk? And I tell them, wrong question. Instead of asking, what will I lose if I take this risk? You must ask, what will I lose if I don't take this risk? Human beings are loss averse. So reframe your relationship to uncertainty, to risk-taking, to experimentation, because we have to be, the only thing I can tell you, money back guarantee about the future. You want to know what it is? If you want to know what it is, I need to see a yes in the chat. Otherwise, I can skip the slide. I'm running out of time anyway. I don't have to do future predictions if people don't want to know. Chris, you want to know? Yes. Okay. Roy is like, I want to know. Okay. So here is the only prediction that I can make about the future. 100% money back guarantee. Mark my words, write it down, record this talk if you want to. The prediction about the future that I can make with 100% accuracy is that the future will arrive whether you are prepared for it or not. Future is not interested in molding itself to your level of preparedness. You know, February 2020, I was flying back to India and I was on a flight and I still remember what was going on. I was feeling like I was trying to escape the world of falling dominoes. Flights were getting canceled, flights were getting redirected, situation on the ground was not certain. We're talking like the first 6 weeks of the pandemic breaking out. And as I was getting in the plane, somebody sent me a photograph of what the scene was on the airport when I was going to land, and there were hundreds of people congregated. And I thought to myself, oh God, if I don't have COVID, I will get it once I land. The situation is so bad. And as I sat down in the aircraft and I put on my seatbelt, reading well-meaning messages from a worried father, I had to say to him, it does not matter. The reason it does not matter is that I will not know what is the situation in the ground till I land. I get in front of an immigration officer who may have received a directive 5 minutes before I got there. And then based on his interpretation of that directive, he would say to me what he wanted to say. And that is when I would have to respond. So the experimental mindset is key to surviving in the current world and is the key to high performance, because the more experimentation we can have, the greater our range of responses, the higher our ability to meet that future, whichever way it arrives. Are you with me? Is this making sense? Okay, good. At least Roy is agreeing with me. So my question for you is this. How would your life change? How would your organization's life change if you had 10% more courage? How would life change if you had 50% more courage? How would life change if you had 500% more courage? I have got exactly 5 minutes, so let me recap. Any enterprise, no matter how digital, can't outperform its human architecture. So if you are looking for a high-performance culture, start paying attention to the human architecture, because the human architecture runs on meaning, contribution, and community, focus on purpose. Digital needs human, humans need narrative. Create that narrative, step number 1. Step number 2 is around reframing your relationship with work and rest. A strong work ethic, unless accompanied by a strong rest ethic, is a path to burnout. And finally, learn to have the mindset of experimentation. So one final thing, a lot of you don't have your cameras on. I haven't been able to see you. That's all right. Can you please pick up your phone, turn on your camera. Don't start checking email, okay? Just pick up your phone, turn on your camera. Yes, Roy, you too. Open your camera and point it to the screen, because I'm going to be sharing with you my QR code to my LinkedIn profile. I would love for you to connect with me. I would love to hear from you how this resonated with you, what your thoughts are, what your experiences are as you are trying to create a culture of high performance in your organization. I am very, very honored and grateful to have been invited to a forum that is so global in its participation and so ambitious in this initiative to make an impact in the times that we live in. Thank you very much. And I'm going to hand it back to our wonderful MC, Neha. All right, Neha, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am. And this was truly a very inciting session. The points that you touched upon, I think, are something that we all need to put our heart and brain into, especially the purpose of our being, our organizations being. As Dr. Philip also said, the historic thinking should be reevaluated. And work ethic versus the rest ethic, I think that's one of the most important thing in today's time, where I think more than a physical tiredness, a person is into that mental frame of mind where we actually need some time off from the digital space and the professional commitments that we have to introspect and find out where we are lacking. Also, the importance of taking risks. I think we all need to put our heart and mind to it. So thank you so much for such an insightful and interesting, thought-provoking session today.